You kneel down by the same bed you've tended for years, push a finger into the earth, and feel it come back hard and dry, like packed clay that forgot how to breathe. No worms. No give. Just tired ground that swallows water and gives nothing back. For a long time I believed the answer had to sit on a shelf, in a heavy bag with a number and a barcode and a price that keeps climbing every spring. It doesn't. There's a plain bag of rice in almost every pantry, costing about $1, that quietly does the one thing those bags promise and rarely deliver. It brings the soil back to life, and it fills it with worms. I know how that sounds. Rice, the same stuff you rinse in a bowl before dinner, turning dead dirt into living soil full of earthworms. But once you understand what is actually happening down there, it stops sounding like a trick and starts sounding like the most obvious thing in the world. So let me walk you through the whole thing today. Why your soil went quiet in the first place, what $1 of rice actually does under the surface, and the exact way to use it, measured out so you can copy it word for word. I am going to give you 3 methods, from the lazy one to the one the science backs up hardest, and every one of them costs about the price of a candy bar. First, though, we have to talk about why the ground went dead. Because if you do not understand that part, the fix just looks like magic, and I do not want you trusting magic. I want you trusting your own 2 hands. Healthy soil is not a bag of dirt. It is a living thing, closer to a crowded city than a pile of sand. Down there, billions of tiny microbes are working around the clock, breaking down old roots and leaves into food your plants can actually drink. Earthworms travel up and down through it, digging channels that let air and water reach deep, and leaving behind those rich droppings gardeners call castings, which glue the soil into soft crumbs. All of it is one connected crew, working the night shift, and none of them ever sending you a bill. Now here is what went wrong. That whole underground crew runs on food, and their food is carbon. Simple organic matter. The stuff that falls off a forest floor for free every autumn. But most of our gardens have been scraped clean of it. We rake up every leaf, we haul off every clipping, we till the ground so the last of the old richness burns away in the air, and then we pour on a bag of synthetic fertilizer that feeds the plant a fast meal while the soil life underneath slowly starves. Think of it like a house full of workers with nothing left in the pantry. They do not die all at once. They just quietly leave, or go dormant, and one spring you push your finger in and there is nobody home. Hard dry, worm-free. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the ground ran out of groceries, and nobody ever told you it needed feeding. So the real question was never how to force life back into dead soil. It was simpler than that. How do you set out a meal so good that the microbes come back on their own, multiply, and bring the worms with them? And that is where the rice comes in. Rice is almost pure starch, which is just carbon in a form microbes adore. To the tiny life in your soil, a handful of rice is not a grain of food, it is a feast. A single, dense, slow-release meal that wakes up the sleeping microbes and gives the survivors something to eat and something to breed on. And here is the part that connects straight to the worms. Earthworms do not actually eat your dead leaves the way you might picture. They eat the microbes and the softened, rotting matter those microbes create. So when you throw a cheap microbe feast into the soil, you are not just feeding the bacteria. You are stocking the exact buffet earthworms travel toward. Feed the small things, and the worms follow the small things. That is the whole chain, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. All right. Let me give you the first method, the lazy one, because some of you just want to walk outside and do something today. Method 1 is buried uncooked rice, and it could not be simpler. You take a small handful of plain dry uncooked rice, white or brown, whatever is cheapest in the pantry. For a normal raised bed or a patch about the size of a bath towel, you want roughly a 1/4 cup of rice, no more. You dig a few small holes around 4 to 6 inches deep, tuck a spoonful of rice into each one, and cover it back over completely with soil. That depth matters, so let it land. You are burying it, not scattering it on top. Then you water it in and you walk away. Over the next couple of weeks, that buried rice softens, molds, and becomes a microbe colony down in the dark. The soil life swarms it, multiplies around it, and the worms start migrating toward that rich, active pocket. Come back in 3 or 4 weeks. Dig gently near one of those spots, and you will very often find the soil darker, softer, and threaded with worms that were not there before. Now the honest caveat, because this audience has heard enough fairy tales, and I am not going to add one. Never ever scatter rice on the surface, and never bury it shallow. Rice on top of the ground is just a dinner bell for rats, mice, and birds. And that is the last thing you want near your beds. Bury it deep, cover it fully, and use a small amount. A quarter cup feeds a bed. A whole bag rotting in one spot just turns into a slimy, sour mess that does more harm than good. Small, deep, and covered. That is the rule. Do it that way, and the only thing that shows up is worms. That method works, but it is slow and a little scattershot. If you want to feed your whole garden at once, and feed it something the researchers have actually put under a microscope, then you want method 2. And this is where $1 of rice really starts to earn its keep. Method 2 is fermented rice water, and it is the one I would reach for first. When you rinse rice before cooking, that cloudy white water you normally pour down the drain is loaded with loose starch and trace nutrients. On its own, it is mildly useful. But if you let it ferment, something far better happens. It becomes a living culture of beneficial bacteria, the same family of lactic acid bacteria that turns milk into yogurt and cabbage into sauerkraut. You are basically brewing a probiotic drink for your soil. Here is the exact recipe, and I want you to write this down because the ratios matter. Take 1 cup of rice and rinse it in 2 cups of clean water, swishing it around until the water goes cloudy and white. Pour that cloudy rice water off into a clean jar. That milky water is your starter. Cover the jar loosely with a cloth or a lid set on top, but not sealed tight, because the culture needs to breathe, and set it somewhere warm and out of direct sun, around room temperature for 2 to 3 days. And here is the number that matters most, straight from the research. A peer-reviewed 2021 study on fermented washed rice water found that the population of beneficial bacteria climbed steadily and peaked at right around 3 days of fermentation, and then began to fall off after that. The same study measured real jumps in nitrogen fixing, in phosphorus and potassium becoming available, and in the natural growth compounds that help roots. So this is not folklore. 3 days is the sweet spot. Too soon and the culture is thin. Too long and it starts to sour and decline. When it smells pleasantly tangy, a little like sourdough starter, it is ready. Now you dilute it, and please do not skip this part. That fermented water is strong, so you never pour it on straight. Mix 1 part fermented rice water into 10 to 20 parts plain water in a watering can. So 1 cup of the ferment into 10 to 20 cups of water. Then water it right into the soil around the base of your plants. Not on the leaves, about once every week or 2 during the growing season. You are drenching the root zone with billions of living microbes and the food they arrived on. All from rice you would have rinsed down the sink anyway. Let me give you the safe use notes here too, because a ferment is a living thing, and living things can go wrong. If your jar ever grows fuzzy-colored mold on top, pink or black or green fuzz, throw it out and start fresh. A little clear or whitish film is normal, but fuzzy color is not. Keep it loosely covered so bugs stay out. And do not store it for weeks trying to save it. This is a make-it-and-use-it brew. A fresh dollar batch every couple of weeks is the whole idea. If you are finding this useful so far, take a quick second to subscribe. This channel is all about bringing a garden back to life for next to nothing, and there is a lot more of this coming. Which brings me to method 3, the strongest version, for the gardener who wants to go one step further and brew a concentrated culture they can keep. This is the same idea as the rice water, taken up a level, and it comes out of a well-known natural farming tradition. Method 3 is a rinse water lactic acid culture, and it works in 2 stages. Stage 1, you make that same cloudy rice rinse water, 1 cup of rice swished in 2 cups of water, poured into a jar, covered loosely, and left somewhere cool and shaded for 2 to 3 days until it smells slightly sour. Stage 2 is where it changes. You strain that soured rice water and mix it with plain milk, any milk, at roughly 1 part rice water to 10 parts milk. So a splash of your rice ferment into a larger jar of milk. Cover it loosely again and leave it another few days. What happens next looks strange the first time you see it. The mixture separates. The good bacteria multiply and pull the milk apart into 2 layers, a thick pale curd that floats up top and a clear yellowish liquid underneath. That clear yellow liquid is your finished culture, sometimes called a lactic acid bacteria serum. You pour off that yellow liquid, and now you have a concentrated jar of beneficial microbes that keeps far longer than plain rice water, especially if you stir in an equal amount of sugar or molasses to hold it stable and tuck it somewhere cool and dark. The floating curd, by the way, is not waste. You can toss it right onto your compost pile or bury it in a bed because it is more microbe food. To use the finished serum, you dilute it hard, even harder than the rice water. Just a tablespoon or 2 into a full gallon of plain water, Then pour it around your plant roots or over the compost every week or two. A single small jar of this, made from about $1 of rice and a little milk, treats an entire garden for a whole season. Same safe use rules apply. If it ever smells rotten foul instead of sour and tangy or grows colored fuzz, do not use it. Trust your nose. A healthy culture smells sharp and sour, almost cheesy, never like garbage. So now you have 3 ways up the same ladder. Bury a handful of dry rice for a slow, no-effort feed. Ferment your rinse water for a weekly probiotic drench. Or brew the concentrated culture when you want a batch that lasts. Every one of them does the same underlying job, feeding the soil life so it multiplies and pulls the worms in behind it. And every one of them cost about $1. Let me be square with you about the timeline, because I will not sell you overnight miracles. You are not going to bury rice on Monday and dig up a worm paradise on Tuesday. What you are doing is starting a population, and populations take a few weeks to grow. With the buried rice, give it 3 to 4 weeks before you go looking. With the rice water drench, you will often see your plants perk up and green up within a couple of weeks, and the worm count builds over a season as you keep feeding. The soil gets a little more alive with every batch. This is not a firework. It is a slow fire you keep feeding, and by the end of one growing season, the same bed that came back hard and dead in your hand comes back dark, soft, and crawling. And I want to tie the science back together for you here, because it matters. The reason this works is not that rice is some rare miracle grain. It is that soil life was starving for simple carbon, and rice is one of the cheapest, densest sources of it sitting in your house. The researchers who fermented that rinse water were not looking at a folk trick. They found real measurable spikes in beneficial bacteria and in the nutrients plants can use, peaking around that 3-day mark. And other soil scientists have long documented the tight partnership between a thriving microbe population and a thriving earthworm population, each one feeding the other. The $1 of rice just lights the match. The living soil does everything after that, exactly the way it did on every wild forest floor long before anyone thought to sell fertility in a bag. So here is the one idea I want you to carry out of all of this. You do not buy your soil back to life. You feed it back to life. The worms and the microbes never really left because they were beaten. They left because the pantry went bare. Put food back in the ground in the simplest form there is, and they come home on their own. And they bring the whole living city back with them. Go rinse a cup of rice this week. Save that cloudy water instead of pouring it away. Let it sit 3 days, thin it down, and pour it into the tiredest bed you own. Then come back in a few weeks and push your finger into that same ground. When it gives, soft and cool and threaded with worms where there was nothing before, you will understand something the fertilizer aisle never wanted you to work out. The answer was never on the shelf. It was in the pantry the whole time, and it cost you about $1. If you want more ways to bring a garden back for next to nothing, there are plenty of videos right here on the channel waiting for you.